today's show, we take a look at the assassination of President Garfield. We'll look at his rise to the presidency, his daily encounters with the general public, and how he managed to upset a deranged madman. We'll also discuss the life of Charles Guiteau, what God told him to do, his assassination attempt on Garfield, and then the brutal, borderline archaic treatment the president received after being shot. If you like blood and pus, this one is right up your alley. I'm Mike.
I'm Ian.
And I'm Dave. If you thought Mike was only good for gas station cuisine tips and college fuck stories, stick around. Tonight, he's going to dominate the narrator's chair like a can of cold SpaghettiOs at 2 a.m. This is Necronomipod.
It's never going to happen. And then he's angry too, and then he has what he believes is a divine inspiration, that God has told him that he needs to kill the president. And he says it's nothing personal. And God has told him to do this. So he follows him to church, he thinks about shooting him there. And then he reads in the paper that Garfield is going to go on a trip. And he's going to be in the Baltimore Potomac train station, which is where the National Gallery of Art stands today. So there are tracks right along the National Mall. And so when Garfield goes there on the morning of July 2nd, 1881, Guiteau is waiting in the shadows.
I just had to make a quick pit stop in Kentucky at the Buffalo Trace Distillery to pick up a bottle of Eagle Rare, some Buffalo Trace, or some Blanton's, whatever they have out for the day.
Nice.
I pull in, I do my temperature check, I get my sticker, they let me in, I walk all the way across, only to discover 200 to 250 people in line to get into the gift shop. I was on a tight schedule. We tried to sneak in the back door even, and we're directed to the line.
Damn.
Needless to say, I left empty-handed with no bourbon.
200 people.
Everyone loves bourbon now.
It is like the new cool thing, isn't it?
Yeah. Like back in the old days, you could pretty much get, I mean, not everything, but you could get most things you wanted. Now everyone loves bourbon, and even some of the, lesser quality stuff is just impossible to get anymore because everyone loves their bourbon. And it's disheartening. Even
when the liquor stores do get it now, they're jacking up the price because they know that, people are so into it, right?
It's immediately gone. Yeah.
Yeah. It's fucking ridiculous.
Even like, Ohio does bottle lotteries for the stuff that goes like that. And you have to sign up and they pick names and whatnot. Like Eagle Rare is a $30 bottle of bourbon that you could, I mean, it wasn't always easy to get, but you could get. Now it's in the lottery. I mean, it never even hits the shelf anymore.
That's one of my favorites. And
delicious.
I only have it when you or someone else I know gets it because I'm not a part of that hunt.
I have nothing for this conversation. I don't like whiskey at all. Can't do it. I tried. I got Maker's Mark.
You like gin?
Yeah.
Well, who doesn't? It's cold gin time again.
You always win.
Quote, Kiss. 1973.
I love Maker's Mark. Is
that a bourbon or?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
It's a wheat bourbon. That's my general every daily drink.
Yeah.
That's a nice tour at that distillery. I was there last year.
Yeah, I tried real
Not your
hard
thing,
to get
though.
into
You ever
it,
tried Scotch? Scotch is, for me, the biggest noticeable difference with taste.
Really?
Yeah. You might not like it still, but
Yeah.
I have a bottle of Glenlivet. I'll let you try some of that.
I wish I could remember the name of the tequila that our mutual friend had at one of our neighborhood gatherings.
I don't even remember.
Yeah, he had me drink it on the rocks. He said you don't do shots of it.
I don't
it was
love
good though.
I don't love tequila.
No, I don't either.
Usually I don't, but I like that. It was good.
Although The Rock's got a new tequila out. I want to try that. I don't think it's that expensive. It's like a $20 bottle or something like that.
Yeah.
I think. We'll see.
I'm not sure how good a $20 bottle of tequila is going to be.
Look, if it's good enough,
let us know.
If it's good enough for Dwayne The Rock Johnson, it's good enough for me. We'll
Kind
leave
of
it
like
at that.
Connor's whiskey.
Can confirm that was not good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The hot, what's it called? Proper 12?
Proper 12. I mean, it was okay. It tasted like a cheaper
just
bottle
Irish
of whiskey? Yeah. Nothing special.
I don't like Irish whiskey.
It was okay. Like, yeah, I don't know.
Everyone loves Jameson. I think Jameson's fucking foul.
I haven't had Jameson in years, but I do think Jameson was light years better than Proper 12. From what I remember. There was something I was going to say. Oh, about this guy, Ian, saying he's not a whiskey fella. I once saw this man rip 6 straight shots of Fireball whiskey. And then,
Good point, Mike. Good
while
point.
drinking beer, and that might have been a tequila night. Who the fuck else knows what? And I think that was either the night you got lost or you just fell right in the mud. The one time you tried to go through the backyard and not around.
Yeah. The mud night, that was a rough night.
Oh, you think?
That was the sponge incident. That may have or may not have happened. I don't know.
Oh, it happened.
Pretty safe to say that happened.
You want to remind people what the sponge incident is?
I don't think we've ever told it on this.
I believe.
Go ahead.
You can tell it for me because I don't remember any of it.
I believe your wife located a sponge in the sink the following morning with a bite mark that could have forensically been linked to your teeth, indicating that you attempted to eat a sponge. Must have looked rather appetizing.
It got in the way of his Hot Pockets that night.
I don't even understand how I would mistake a sponge for food. But
You know what's ridiculous is like when you're like, you ever have those moments when you were like super stupid drunk, but then like as you're doing something super stupid, you have that moment of clarity where you're like, what the fuck am I doing? I can't remember what that happened to me sometime recently, but I can't even remember what I was doing. But I was like, almost something as stupid as like I was trying to put like a bowl of cereal in the microwave, which like I wasn't doing. That wasn't what it was. But it was like as you're doing it, you're like, wait, what am I doing? Why is this happening?
Were you jerking off to Nickelback or something like that?
Well, you don't have to be drunk to do that. I think, that's what it was. I was jerking off to Jodi Arias, and I was like, wait, what the fuck are you doing? And then I deleted image, open up Casey Anthony, and boom goes the dynamite.
yeah, we get those sponges that are like
Appetizing?
sponge on one side and then like the Brillo pad thing on the other side.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Still doesn't help your
that
case.
explains it, Ian. Thanks for clearing that up.
I just mean
So you're looking at either bright yellow or bright green. Either way, we're going to town. I just learned, and this is kind of going along the lines of what you started us with, Dave, with like the 200 people deep of whiskey. I was listening to Pod Van Dam last week, and Pat on their show is a card collector, sports cards. And he said that recently Walmart and Target have decided they're done selling sports cards because of the amount of fights that break out between grown men.
I saw that story, yeah.
Every Friday, Target was having to like break up fist fights between adults over these like sports cards.
Really?
So they're just like, fuck it, we're out of this business. Yeah.
My Pikachu, motherfucker.
Is that what they're mad about? Is
Pokemon and sports cards.
Just all like card collector, like sports is what the guys on Pod Van Dam were talking
the story I saw highlighted Pokemon cards.
about. But like I guess they all come in at the same time and people were just fighting over it.
There's this one dude. There's this dude online that I think it was on Trashy, on the Trashy subreddit.
On Reddit? Oh, that's my favorite.
This dude, one of his things for his YouTube channel is he opens up Pokemon cards live and like to see what he gets. He opened this one up and it was some Pikachu that he had been like hunting for forever. Like it's super rare, but it had a crease. It had a crease in it. You couldn't see the crease on the camera. This dude fucking flips out, starts crying, throws himself on the ground all over a Pikachu card
Yeah.
that had a little crease in it.
Yikes. Hey, everyone has their own thing, I guess. I don't think I'd be fist fighting other men over things, but whatever.
Well, it depends on what that thing is.
How
Mike.
bad could it have been that Target was like, fuck it, we're not selling any of this
We don't
anymore.
want to deal with these yahoos anymore.
We're not going to make hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's not fucking worth it. They ought to do like a raffle type thing, even like they do with the bourbons.
Yeah.
What? I don't understand what you would be fighting about in Target. Unless you're just trying to buy multiple packs.
Like you probably want to buy like the box set, like the whole box or something, and other guys are like, no, I want the,
Do they throw it on the shelf? Is it like a throwdown Black Friday type scenario where you're fist fighting to grab it off the shelf?
That was the impression I got listening to the boys on Pod Van Dam talk about it, was that it was like Black Friday style chaos.
Nice.
Because my son looks at the Pokemon cards. It's just like an aisle with all the cards laid. You know what I mean? Like a toy aisle, but
Not anymore.
Tell him to watch himself. You better have his back next time.
He's going to get his ass beaten there.
Some fucking incel's going to tackle him and take that Pikachu.
That's good stuff.
Yeah. So there's that.
what else we got?
What else do we have? What else is going on with everyone?
Usually, Dave, when you're like commanding the show, you got to just be able to quarterback it from one thing to the next.
Yeah, I didn't have a segue, right?
Usually, as soon as it trails off, I just go, so Ian, what do we got?
Can we talk about Paul Mooney? Rest in peace. Paul Mooney died this morning. Fantastic comic. Absolute legend. One of the best to ever do it. So
I was quite busy all day.
Pour one out for Paul Mooney today. I was watching Paul Mooney clips all day today.
You were busy today, too, I see.
Oh, my God. Fucking genius. I love that guy.
I check my phone, and you guys have blown it up with the videos and conversation, and I'm like, okay, something's going down.
One of the absolute best. So check out some Paul Mooney
Pour
stuff.
one out for him tonight.
Absolutely. Legend. So, Mike, what do you have for us this evening?
I'll tell you what I got going on right now. It's fucking allergies. My eye is itching like crazy.
So, Mike, you've narrated a few of the bonus episodes, but never the regular Sunday show. So you're taking your first shot at doing your own show tonight. How you feeling about that?
Well, I'll tell you what. I'd done a couple bonus shows about obviously wrestling. We did the Chris Benoit and the Bruiser Brody, and we ended up using the Chris Benoit. I think we released it as a Sunday show at one point, but it's a lot different.
Oh, that's true. So yeah, people have been exposed to your brilliance.
But the show was meant for the bonus audience. It's a lot more pressure when it's like the general public. Like there could be people looking us up, and this is the first episode they listen to. Yeah. They won't be back for seconds.
Are you cutting our listening audience in half tonight? Is that what you're suggesting?
Well, that gets in part of the long part of the story. So then the other thing was I had been toying with the idea of wanting to do this episode, maybe for a bonus. But, Ian had been busting his ass for the last month and a half on Epstein. And I think he was in favor of like, fuck yeah, I'll take the week off and he gets to dive into something fun for, whatever, or play video games or go fight guys at Target for Pokemon cards, whatever he wants to do.
Get your hands off my kid. It's a Pikachu card, motherfucker.
What's that from Seinfeld? As I rain blows upon him. Festivus for the rest of us. So we decided, hey, let's just give it a shot. It's just a one-off. This isn't like going to be a new trend. Mike does an episode. So if you don't like it, whatever, Ian will be back next week. The other thing that I thought was funny is that we're kind of wedging this episode in between two extremely popular topics, I think. And I'm not going to give away what we're doing next week. Yeah. Patrons might know if they listen to our cool down show. But so literally we're going from Jeffrey Epstein, which has been doing very well for us. We're going to have mine, which is in wrestling called like the popcorn match, where everyone gets up and takes a piss break and gets a beer and a popcorn. And then everyone will ignore this one and come back next week for another big show. So
can we give a little teaser for next week that maybe it's part 2 of one of the most downloaded episodes to date?
Yeah! It is the episode where people say like credit as the reason they found us. Yeah. Number one reason why they found us. Second, recently, actually, we've been getting a lot of comments. People have found us because of Skinwalker Ranch.
That's probably because the show just started season 2.
Yeah, maybe so. But anyways, this other topic has been consistently what people say. This is the reason why I found you guys, because I was looking for this show and boom goes the dynamite. So we'll be back for a part 2. Yeah. And it'll be extra good because Ian had a whole week off to do more research on it. He's literally sitting here with his shirt off, his feet up, eating Cheetos. Just the orange is all over his body.
He's put on like 20 pounds in the last week, I think.
There are 4 raccoons just climbing around Dave's office. He apparently was bring your buddies to work day for Ian.
I don't remember what I was going to say.
Okay.
So I like the subject matter tonight. It's still, it's a little different than the normal shows, but it's still some excellent true crime. So yeah, I'm excited to hear about it.
I think so. And another hometown hero in James Garfield, our only president from the actual Cleveland area.
Born not too far from here.
Right. And then really for me, I got into him kind of growing up. We would go visit the beautiful cemetery where he's buried at in Cleveland on the east side, Lakeview Cemetery. So I would go with like my mom and grandma growing up because they have like, what is it, like Daffodil Sunday, I think it is, where like, they just have this entire hill of daffodils that like, blossom, and it's gorgeous and it's very old and Gothic looking, the entire cemetery. And there's a whole big monument to Garfield, and you can walk in and go downstairs to the crypt where you could see him and his wife's casket and then the urns of his daughter and his son-in-law. You can go up to the balcony, get a great view of the, downtown Cleveland and the lake.
Maybe go have some lunch in Little Italy afterwards.
It's right there.
Yeah.
It's fantastic. Yeah. So I kind of grew up very interested in Garfield. And then as I'm doing my, presidential biographies, I read a book on Garfield. The book I picked on him was like part bio, part assassination. And I was just like, oh, this is fucking awesome. So we'll see what we got here.
And with that, let's throw it back to Mike for his for his show.
All right, man. Talking a lot.
Give us some good stuff, Mike.
Yeah. Ian, I don't know how the fuck you do this. My throat's already dry and I haven't even gotten to page 1. Real quick, I wanted to throw out the sources that I used for this, just in case anyone was actually interested. The book that I had just mentioned that I read, it is a nonfiction. It's an account of Garfield's life and his assassination, but it reads like a novel, even almost a graphic novel at some points. It's very fascinating. If I had to recommend one book to follow up with this subject on, it's Destiny of the Republic by Candace Millard. Really good book. Loved it. I also read probably the definitive biography on President Garfield, just titled Garfield by Alan Peskin. Alan Peskin was a longtime Cleveland State University professor. I believe he has since passed away. And then some of the websites I used were the millercenter.org, which is an affiliate of the University of Virginia that kind of focuses on presidential and political history, pbs.org, and history.com. So just FYI. Okay, we'll see you guys next week.
Go check out that source and see what you think.
Go read those books and let me know. Known as the last of the log cabin presidents, James Abram Garfield was born November 19th, 1831 in Moreland Hills, Ohio, less than 20 miles from Cleveland. He was raised in a household that has been described as, quote, on the raw edge of poverty. Garfield's father, Abram, who among other jobs was a local strongman known for his wrestling abilities, passed away prior to Garfield's second birthday. So we got, early professional wrestling here with Garfield's dad.
Like those strongmen were the pro athletes of their day. Yeah. Like they were the real deal back then.
Like I just picture them with like their work boots, jeans up over their navel, almost to their nipples, like just a hairy chest. They're like cutting wood, and then they would go like grapple other men. Like they
were superstars.
Yeah. Abe Lincoln's favorite sport, by the way, professional wrestling.
That's right.
Really?
Yeah. So his dad passed away prior to his second birthday. Garfield and his 4 older siblings were raised solely by his mother, Eliza, who Garfield would come to develop a close relationship with throughout the rest of his life. Because Garfield was the youngest and wasn't really able to do a ton of work at the time, his mother had high hopes for him and really stressed that he focus on his education. Garfield always excelled in school, but in 1847, at the age of 16, he left home to go work on the canal boats that transported commerce between Cleveland and Pittsburgh.
Hey, Ian, nowadays we transport ass whoopings from Cleveland to Pittsburgh.
Get the fuck out of here.
Goddamn, pal.
I like how the Browns beat them like once in the past 10 years. And it just rubbed in my face all the time.
It's a new dawn, my friend. We'll see. Football season starts soon.
They'll be here before you know it. During Garfield's 6 weeks working on the canals, he fell overboard 14 times, finally catching an awful fever and returning home. His days working on the water were over, but his love for the sea would remain with him for the rest of his life. That's something we'll get into a little bit more later on.
Yeah, maybe the canals aren't for you, pal.
14 times. And there were some accounts I read that like it was like in the dead of night, like pitch black. He fell overboard and like you just lose all sense of like what's up and what's down, and it's crazy he survived. 14 times in 6 weeks.
It's crazy. The history of the canals is very interesting. I mean, that's a whole story in and of itself, but
coming soon to Necronomipod. Dave explores the canals.
Like the Ohio Erie Canal, and then like that Cleveland to Pittsburgh Canal. Like it's amazing that they just cut canals out of the earth. Just made it, yeah, from nothing.
And
you could still see the remnants of that a lot.
Well, what I thought
here
was interesting too, and I don't know the extent of it because I don't know a lot about canals, but they were pulled by mules who were on land. So they would just cut these canals in the land, but it would still be mules that were actually pulling them through the water.
And you can see that's like the towpath where you go ride your bike in the national park and stuff. Those are the mule trails that run next to the canal where they used to do that.
Garfield was in charge of the canals. Yeah. I don't know how from the actual, canal boat you do it, but he was that was his thing when he first started, was in charge of the
mules. Pretty amazing.
I feel like you'd have to be on the outside, like kind of moving them along, but I don't know.
And I think the railroads boomed and canals were done. They're like, yeah, we don't need this anymore.
Bye. Now back to focusing on his education, Garfield studied at the Eclectic Institute in Hiram, Ohio, which today is known as Hiram College. In 1854, at age 23, Garfield entered Williams College in Massachusetts, where he would graduate with honors 3 years later.
Hey, can I just interject that I believe the second most famous graduate of Hiram College is Cool Down's attorney?
I believe
is that now correct?
Boom.
We won't name him because obviously he doesn't want to be associated in public with us, but yeah, esteemed Hiram College graduate, nonetheless.
In 1857, Garfield returned to Hiram and served as the president of the Eclectic Institute. The following year, he married his former classmate, Lucretia Rudolph. Also during this time, he began teaching himself law and passed the Ohio bar exam in 1861. It was also right around then that he began getting into politics. He campaigned in Ohio for John C. Fremont, a presidential candidate of the newly formed Republican Party in 1856. And 3 years later, Garfield was elected to the Ohio State Senate, becoming the youngest member of the legislature at only 28 years old.
It's pretty young.
Yeah, I was like, man, 7 years younger than me, and what have I accomplished in life?
You're a superstar. What are you talking about?
Yeah, something like that. By the start of the Civil War, Garfield had become a staunch abolitionist. In 1861, he organized the 42nd Ohio Infantry, rising from lieutenant colonel to full colonel in a very short time. His greatest success in the war came in January 1862 at the Battle of Middle Creek, where Garfield's men were greatly outnumbered but managed to defeat the Confederates, thereby leaving the Union in full control of eastern Kentucky. In December 1863, Garfield resigned from the Army to take his seat in the United States House of Representatives, to which he had been elected the previous November without ever having campaigned. At the time, Garfield didn't want to leave the war, but was convinced to do so by then-President Abraham Lincoln. And that was actually kind of a theme throughout Garfield's life. He never outwardly sought any office he was elected to. Never sought this congressional seat, never sought the Ohio State Senate seat. Never sought the United States Senate seat, which we'll get to in a minute, nor the presidency. He never, I mean, he may have expressed it behind closed doors to friends, but it was all his friends that kind of did the work for him and would help get him elected. He never outwardly announced, that he was interested in a seat.
So not necessarily politically ambitious, but people recognize that potential in him. And
I think it was more he was ambitious. He just felt if it's meant to be, it'll happen, kind of. Or I'll let them deal with it and I'll go about doing whatever I'm currently doing and serve it that way. That's how I would probably say.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Not so much with the presidency, I don't think, though. I think you're right with the presidency. I don't think he was interested in that at all. For the remainder of the war, Garfield distinguished himself as one of the most radical Republicans in Congress.
So he was the Marjorie Taylor Greene of his day.
Goddamn, pal. Something like that.
Something like that. Okay, fair enough.
This is what I thought was interesting. Even though he had campaigned for Abraham Lincoln in 1860, he never really liked the president and considered him a, quote, second-rate Illinois lawyer who wasn't tough enough on the South and who failed to appropriately make the war about slavery. So at this time, the Emancipation Proclamation didn't happen until September of 1862. Garfield felt from the beginning the Civil War should have just been strictly about slavery. Make it about that, and let's go after them, because now they're the bad guys. And he thought Lincoln was a little too passive with that.
Well, Lincoln's main goal was to preserve the Union, right? One of his campaign promises to the South was he wouldn't fuck around with slavery where it already existed, right? Like Lincoln wasn't this big
and that's why
abolitionist like everyone thinks.
That's why Garfield's looked at as a radical, because he was more like, fuck the South. This is about slavery. We're going to beat you into submission and then we'll welcome you back.
Yeah, and Lincoln absolutely did not take that point of view.
Yeah. So,
which I think people think he did. But
I think that's what makes the Emancipation Proclamation as great as it was, because kind of it was like.
But it took him a while to get there.
Took him a little time. And that's why, the radical Republicans were not so much.
I feel like I'm learning a lot tonight.
I was about to say, you're going to hear... It's like, wake me up when Garfield gets abducted.
I didn't know any of that shit that you just said. So
yeah, like Lincoln's main goal was to preserve the Union at all costs. He wasn't about to get rid of slavery. He was like, we'll leave it be.
Right. We're just kind of splitting hairs with the factions of the Republican Party kind of here. had the abolitionists like Garfield who just said, no, we want slavery wiped out everywhere. And you had Lincoln who's like, no, let's just all be one country. We won't extend slavery into the new states.
That's right.
What's in the South is in the South. Maybe we'll phase it out eventually, but let's just keep the peace. For a while, he thought that way. And then it was,
until the war started, and then he was all
like,
in.
let's
But
fucking go.
He wasn't itching to start the war by any means.
No. As Garfield aged and matured throughout his 8 terms in Congress, however, he would learn to temper his youthful radicalism and became a seasoned politician. He developed a very useful ability to work for compromise while still defending the core interests of his constituency. So he's learning, Dave. He's not
sold
a radical.
out to the man, in other words.
That's what it was. That is what it was. By 1880, after spending 17 and a half years in the House of Representatives, Garfield had become one of the leaders of the Republican Party. And in January of that year, he was elected to the United States Senate by the Ohio General Assembly, though his term would not commence until March 4th of 1881, about 14 months later. As fate would have it, Garfield never made it to the Senate. That was something I thought was really interesting. I never knew he was elected to be a United States Senator. I also think it's interesting that he was elected 14 months prior.
I was going to ask. That's wild, right?
He was elected to his seat in Congress in December of 1862. It was going to be a full year before he took his seat. It was just different the way the terms were set. And then like when Congress wasn't in session or they were adjourned, they would have to wait for them to come back. It was really weird than how it is now. It's definitely more fluid now and more consistent.
Well, and it's also before the 17th Amendment, so that made it a direct popular vote election for senators.
It was different.
They were
back then.
chosen by the party.
Right.
Yeah.
It's the Ohio General Assembly that's picked him.
That's a big change.
So he was set to take over the Senate on March 4th, 1881. As fate would have it, things would go a little differently for him.
Dun, 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 dun.
Right. I hope people are sticking with us. They're like, fucking history class today? Jesus.
People should know more about the history of their country. It's very educational, and I think it's fantastic, Mike, what you're doing here this evening.
Thank you. And here's the thing. President Garfield is one of those forget about presidents, right? Like, if you weren't from Cleveland, even from Cleveland are like, who the fuck is that? Because he was president for such a short amount of time. There are many people who have, written papers or have theories that had Garfield lived, he would be known as one of the greats. Like they were talking Mount Rushmore status, they thought. I don't know if I'd necessarily buy into that, and it's all what ifs. Yeah. But there was a lot of hype by the people, like the historians, that think Garfield. And
was that his wife, the historian that you're?
Yeah, right.
Put forth these
Lucretia.
I love that name, by the way, Lucretia.
She went by Crete for short.
I like it.
Yeah.
I don't love Crete. It's weird.
I like Lucretia.
Yeah, the name's cool, but not Crete.
I don't know. There was just a lot of hype, about him. Actually, this was one I was going to save for the end because I didn't know if it was going to fit in. But I read a tweet from one of President Clinton's former speechwriters who read every inaugural address from Abe Lincoln to the present day. Between Abe Lincoln in 1861 and Lyndon Johnson in 1965, 104 years, only one inaugural address mentioned racial injustice, and that was James Garfield's. In that 104 years, between Lincoln did and Johnson did, the only other person to do it was Garfield. Kennedy didn't, Truman didn't, Roosevelt didn't, Garfield.
Interesting.
So I thought that was a fun fact. When President Rutherford B. Hayes, elected in 1876, had vowed to be a one-term president, he surprisingly stuck to his word.
What?
When Republicans convened in Chicago in June of 1880, the fight for the nomination stood between former President Ulysses S. Grant, who was going to be running for a third term as commander-in-chief and was part of the stalwart part of the Republican Party, and James Blaine, current senator from Maine and a part of the half-breed portion of the Republican Party. So the difference between the stalwarts and the half-breeds basically came down to political patronage. The stalwarts were more of the old school, to the victor go the spoils, and if we win office, we're going to elect all of our buddies, all of our friends, all the people we owe favors to. The half-breeds were more reformists, and they wanted it to be based more on a merit system. We're going to hire maybe our friends, but we're going to make sure they're people that have earned that position and are right for that position. A little more qualified. That was the biggest difference between them.
Ulysses S. Grant, it's my uncle, by the way.
That's true.
Just want to remind
I
people
think we've
of that.
mentioned that before. Distant relative. So this might get a little tense for you, Dave. I apologize.
Okay.
He didn't win a third term.
I'm going to bear with it, though.
Yeah. So Garfield attended this convention in Chicago, and he was there to nominate for president the current Treasury Secretary, John Sherman of Ohio. Garfield wasn't really a supporter of Sherman, but owed it to him through a personal favor and just kind of felt obliged to do it. When the roll call began, and remember, this isn't a day where there was no primaries. This was fucking chaos.
Good stuff,
This
man.
is interesting shit.
Oh, yeah.
Where it just gets intense. Dave and I were talking before the show. We could do a whole episode on just fucking conventions throughout history. But essentially, like, they would just roll call the states, and delegates would vote for who they wanted to vote for. It wasn't like they were already pre-assigned necessarily, because of primary elections. It was more behind the scenes politicking, people doing favors for other people, the political bosses whipping their people into shape for what they wanted to be, what they wanted them to vote for.
So in other words, the general public had a lot less to do with elections back then.
Yeah.
A lot less.
A lot less. At least until the general election. Yeah. You were kind of just told, like, here's the party.
Here's our guy.
So as it started, like, Garfield was the front runner, but didn't have enough to get the votes. And I think there was like something like 14, 18, 19. I can't remember the number. There was a ton of people running, but Garfield, Blaine, and Sherman were the top three. Sherman was still distant. Anyways, after 36 ballots of voting, and we're talking a couple days here, nobody had enough to get the electoral votes. From the beginning, there was a very small minority of people who wanted Garfield and would vote for him. Garfield wanted nothing to do with this, but he also gave an amazing nomination speech for John Sherman, which further helped his cause. Finally, on the 32nd ballot, there was enough momentum. John Sherman and Blaine dropped out and pledged their support to Garfield, so it kind of gave them all of their votes. And James Garfield walked out of the convention with the Republican nomination as kind of a compromise candidate, because he wasn't at the time directly, with the stalwarts or with the half-breeds. And kind of as a consolation, Chester A. Arthur, who was a stalwart, was chosen to be his running mate. Old Chet.
Chet? Did he go by Chet?
He was. He did go by Chet to his friends. Chet Arthur. Yeah.
It's cool.
I think the conventions are fucking fascinating.
I'm sure it was a lot of fun. Like, contested conventions, just all the backdoor politicking and stuff just would be so interesting.
Yeah. I mean, and we're talking even up to, like, recent, almost modern times. There weren't primaries in every state like there is now. Mm-hmm. Like, even we talked about, like, the Kennedy Nixon in 1960. There were some, and then in 68 there were a few, but not a bunch, and you didn't even have to run in all of them because you just have delegates pledged to you.
That's right.
So, I don't know, very interesting.
The great state of Ohio cast its 25 electoral votes for...
I want you to be our guy when it's time to do it. All right. So anyways, Garfield walks out of the convention with the Republican nomination for president. On the other side, the Democratic Party nominated their own Civil War vet, Winfield S. Scott. There's a name for you, Winfield. Winfield S. Hancock, as their candidate for the presidency. And in one of the closest general elections on record, Garfield beat Hancock by a mere 7,368 votes, less than 1/10% of the total votes cast.
And it's crazy. It's still the smallest margin in history.
Yeah. And that's just the straight popular vote. Yeah. It was really close.
7,000 votes. Can you imagine?
That was it. That was the difference.
That's crazy.
Like, the last election was 7 million. Yeah. 7,000 votes.
Yeah. It's wild.
Yeah.
Now, that being said, it was close, but in the Electoral College, the lead was much larger. Garfield received 214 electoral votes to Hancock's 155. Each candidate carried 19 states. New York, which was won by Garfield, had it gone to Democratic and went to Hancock, which was only won by a few thousand votes, Hancock would have been declared the winner in the Electoral College. So really, New York made the difference.
Thin.
Yeah. So Garfield, at only 49 years old, took the oath of office and was sworn in as the 20th president of the United States on March 4th, 1881.
Question.
Yes.
What's the average age of a president when they go in?
Oh, that's a good question.
Because you said it says only 49, so that's young?
I think that's one of the youngest. Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
The average, I don't know the average age.
Good question. You look at those pictures, though, those old black and white, everyone's got this ginormous beard.
Yeah.
They all look old.
Yeah, he definitely looks older than 49.
Yeah. Who am I kidding? I'm 49. I look exactly as old as that guy.
The median age at inauguration of incoming U.S. presidents is 55.
Okay.
Fun fact, because I had said he was inaugurated on March 4th, 1881. Up until 1937, presidential inaugurations and actually all new members of the federal government were in March, not in January, as they are today. That changed with the passing of the 20th Amendment to the Constitution. I didn't realize it went all the way up to 1937. It was right in the middle of Roosevelt's, 9 decades of destruction. I mean that in a good way. I don't mean he destroyed anything. FDR.
9 decades of destruction.
It was just a joke about how he was in office forever. It was a joke about how long he was in office.
Got it.
It was about 9 decades, I think.
Got it.
He was elected 4 different times, Ian. The only president to do that. Any hoodles. As president, Garfield set about to focus his platform on a few major things. Continue Reconstruction in the South, protect the rights of African Americans, build unity throughout the country, rebuild relations with Latin America, modernize the Navy, and civil service reform. I say all that to get to civil service reform, which, as we stated earlier, this is where the Republican Party was kind of split. Garfield himself did not like the spoils system that was prominent with the stalwart party of the Republicans, part of the Republicans. He found it ineffective.
Oh, you mean hiring people with no previous experience to high-level
Yeah.
government positions?
Not a fan. But even more so than that, he didn't like that how you had to go about doing it. The demands it took on his daily schedule. Back at this time, the Executive Mansion, it was called the Executive Mansion until 1901 when Teddy Roosevelt renamed it the White House. The Executive Mansion essentially had an open door policy. So each day, Garfield would meet with hundreds of people who showed up feeling owed, hoping to obtain some sort of government or cabinet position. Like literally, they can line up at the door, come in, and he would have to meet with them, or his assistants would meet with them, and they would essentially tell them why they should be given jobs.
Talking to people all day? What could be worse than that? That
sounds
sounds
awful. Yeah. Garfield felt this was a huge waste of time and he could be doing much better things like, actually serving the country. Among the thousands of people that showed up at the Executive Mansion each day was Charles Guiteau. And he didn't show up just once. He was there every single day, believing he was owed a major post in the Garfield administration for, and I say this in quotes, all the work he had done to get Garfield elected.
You might not know the answer to this, but is that somebody showing up multiple times? Is that a rare thing? Like back then, if you got told no, then you just fuck off to whatever you were doing before?
I'm not even sure if many people got told no as much. It was just more like, we'll keep your paper on file and we'll let you know. And, most people took that as a hint as I'll go about the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Charles Guiteau, because of reasons we'll get into in a bit, he felt it was a sure thing. He was going to be a leader and a heroic figure and a major part of this administration. So every single day he's showing up and, just maybe not taking the social clues or, the social cues or anything like that and picking up on it. So
He's like, hey, me again. Got a job.
they're like, hey, Chuck, have a seat.
Gives him the Steve Harvey look, like, motherfucker.
What's interesting too about this? This is another little side fucking pop-up video facts. The White House was absolutely decrepit at this point. The Executive Mansion, it was falling apart. It wasn't until Chester Arthur took office that he had the entire place renovated. So there was rats.
Isn't that crazy?
They would say at night you could literally hear the rats running through the kitchen and banging into pots and pans. But then also Garfield's kids would ride their bikes in the White House, the Executive Mansion, come barreling down the main staircase as people were lined up. They would just come rolling down and just fly past people. And they would go into I think it was the East Room and just do laps in there just over and over and over. Hey, if I was the fucking kid of the president, I'd be doing the same thing.
Absolutely.
All right, let's learn a little bit about Charles Guiteau. I promise this does lead to true crime, people. This isn't just a history lesson. Charles Guiteau was born in Freeport, Illinois in 1841 and grew up in a fairly broken home. His mother died when he was 7 years old, and his father was physically abusive. There was a pretty extensive history of mental illness in his family, and while Guiteau himself was never actually diagnosed, modern-day experts have stated they believed he suffered from anything from neurosyphilis to narcissism to schizophrenia.
Mike, what's the difference between neurosyphilis and regular syphilis? I just assume you probably had all of it back in the
So
day.
I did look it up briefly. I don't know the direct what happens to you with syphilis, but with neurosyphilis, it's where it starts fucking impacting your brain and just changes your whole mental makeup.
Yeah, isn't it that's what happens with syphilis, right?
Yeah.
If
So
it
then
goes
what's-
untreated.
So is
it'll-
neurosyphilis just syphilis?
Yeah,
That's not treated?
Maybe so.
I think so. And
That's
then
what killed Al Capone. He just rotted away.
it ends up fucking with your
That's what
head.
the government wants you to believe, Pally. Yeah, so I guess syphilis then. I didn't know if there was a difference because when I looked it up, I was like, oh, it sounds like it's syphilis that just gets bad.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So I never had neurosyphilis, Dave. Just all the other
Allegedly.
all the other syphili.
Okay, chlamydia, Mike. Go on.
They used to call me Clam Mike for short. No matter what he actually had, Guiteau had very much an inflated sense of self-worth, always feeling he was owed something and believing it was his destiny from God to be or do something great.
That sounds like schizophrenia stuff. Thinking God's talking to you.
Yep.
Yeah. Being called upon for a higher purpose.
Yeah.
At the age of 19, here we go, Ian, Guiteau joined the utopian religious cult known as the Oneida Community. In short, the cult believed that everyone on Earth was now in a paradise phase and free from sin, just kind of waiting to be taken to heaven because Jesus had already returned back in 70 AD. They also believed in free love and mutual criticism. And I guess this mutual criticism was like at night they would have like campfires and just like tell anybody and everybody like what they thought was wrong with them.
Goddamn.
Ooh, that sounds fun. Can we
Like,
do that?
So like imagine like all day you're fucking everybody and then at night you get to tell them everything that's wrong. Now the problem with this was
I'm digging this.
nobody liked
community.
Guiteau, so no one was fucking him. And then at night they would all just shit on him.
Well,
And-
yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, he was an odd guy. You know, he was so cocky and arrogant and, you know, kind of felt he was above everybody. But the Oneida Community might be onto something. Maybe a future episode.
Free love and mutual criticism.
Hey, remember earlier today when I was, you know, plowing you? It wasn't as great as when I did it with Becky. So, you know, Susan, if you can work on that a little bit, that'd be great.
You had a couple of stray hairs around your asshole when I was going balls deep. Maybe
Oh, my God.
clean those up by next week.
I
When
almost spit out my beer.
I like a waxed asshole. Sorry, Becky.
Then Karen stands up and everyone's like, oh, fuck, here we go. She pulls out like a fucking Costco receipt this long. Even with this free love gimmick, Guiteau's odd personality and overinflated ego was a put off to the other members of the cult, and he didn't last long in the community. After finally leaving Oneida, which he left twice, he left once and came back and then left again. When he finally left, he tried to sue them, asking for payments for all the work he had done on the Oneida community's behalf, trying to spread their word. Needless to say, he was not successful. He moved to New Jersey. Oneida is in Oneida, New York. That's why they're called the Oneida Community.
Yeah.
He left and went to New Jersey and attempted to start a newspaper based on the Oneida religion, but this also proved to be a failure.
Did you hear about their sister cult, the Oneida Community? They just eat French fries all day. That sounds pretty cool too.
Do you mean the Oneida?
Is it Oneida?
Or I thought you said Allrida.
Oneida.
Oneida.
Oneida. Oneida.
Got it. Okay.
Did I mispronounce it, Mike?
I think I misheard you.
Was that your mutual criticism time?
I was trying to figure out how Allrida had to connect with French fries.
I didn't say Oneida.
That's why I'm saying I might have misheard. Sorry, I'm drunk on information tonight. What the fuck is this?
Alrighty.
Anyways, he next moved to Chicago and worked as a legal clerk. He passed an exam, though not a difficult one, and obtained admission into the bar, making him now a practicing lawyer.
Me personally, I ain't past the bar, but I know a little bit.
He achieved little success and only ever argued one case, which saw him ranting almost incoherently in the courtroom. After this failed career as a lawyer, Guiteau became a traveling theologian.
It's my dream job, by the way.
Traveling theologian?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Bible babble on the road to exotic places
There
and
you go.
locales.
You got to come up with content for that.
Well, that's true. You mean scam. That's what you mean.
Well, of course.
Scam.
Of course. In an attempt to credit his teachings, he wrote a theological book titled The Truth. But the book was just a bad plagiarism of the work of the Oneida Community. So again, not much success. Given that Guiteau struggled to ever hold a steady job, he sort of lived like a bum. He would stay in boarding houses, then skip out and leave town before having to pay his bills. He would essentially live this way the rest of his life. After spending the first half of 1880 in Boston, Guiteau decided to leave town due to the significant amount of money he owed people and because he was accused of theft.
That's a good reason to skip town. Yeah.
He was out.
All right.
On June 11th, 1880, he was a passenger on the SS Stonington when it collided with another ship in heavy fog on the Connecticut River. The Stonington was able to return to port, but the other ship burned and sank with significant loss of life. Although nobody on the Stonington was injured, Guiteau walked away from this incident believing that he had been spared for a higher purpose, further adding to his sense of self-worth. So now he's like, okay, God saved my life. I'm clearly going to be doing a lot of great things.
Delusions of grandeur.
It's going to be given to me. During the 1880 Republican Convention, which Guiteau attended, he was a supporter of Grant and wrote a speech in favor of Grant called Grant versus Hancock. However, when Garfield won the Republican nomination, ever the opportunist, Guiteau simply crossed out Grant's name and replaced it with Garfield. He changed nothing else in the speech. There's only proof that Guiteau actually gave his Garfield speech in public twice. On top of that, he submitted the speech to the Republican Party members during the National Committee meetings in 1880. During these National Committee meetings, which he attended, he even managed to have face-to-face interactions with high-ranking Republican officials, including Chester Arthur, who was soon to be the vice president. But Guiteau never really made an impression on anybody. When Garfield eventually won the presidency, Guiteau went around crediting the speech he wrote as the determining factor in Garfield's victory and told everyone that would listen about it. Though again, almost nobody ever heard of the speech or knew who Charles Guiteau was. So he's taking credit for Garfield's election of the presidency.
So is there documented proof that he actually gave that speech?
They can date it, they can trace it back to like twice that he gave a speech. But again, like it was very small. It might have even been on a street corner. Like it was not anything of any worth.
Like with an empty guitar case with a dollar, some coins in front of it.
Like it comes off as like just everything he does. He's just kind of, a mentally ill man who's just rambling and ranting and thinking he's doing the greatest thing in the world. And everyone's just like, look at this fucko. Like he's out of his mind. Like he's not making any sense.
So is that something that would get you a job? Like all those people that would line up, like would anybody?
Guiteau's mind, it would.
But like other people, if like you went out and were giving speeches, would that actually get you something?
I think it could. Yeah, I think especially if you knew the right people, there was that patronage of like, oh, you did this for us. Again, if you're not in the inn with the higher up Republicans, you might be given some small job. Guiteau's rolling in, asking for, diplomatic positions overseas and, high level things.
And this whole patronage civil service thing, this is before the government was based on civil service exams and whatnot. So all jobs were patronage jobs. Like now they're, the ambassador jobs and the high ranking, whatever. But back then, you're talking about every job in the federal government, right? One
of the goals of the Garfield administration was civil service reform. He was assassinated, spoiler alert. So out of homage to him, Chester Arthur, who I don't think does get enough credit, passed civil service reform the first time ever in the country. And since then, it's improved and there's been a little bit more accountability for it.
Yeah, like when new presidents come in, they don't get rid of every federal employee. Right. I think that's how it was more or less back then.
You can clean house. Yeah.
It just doesn't work like that anymore. It's merit based.
Right. And Chester Arthur isolated himself because he was, like we said earlier, one of the stalwart Republicans, and they were known for the patronage. And he was like, no, I owe this to Grant or to Garfield because he did really like Garfield and was distraught over his death. He goes, I owe it to Garfield. I'm going to pass the civil service reform. And he was, a lot of people didn't like him because of that. Anyways.
You still have those, like ambassadors, like, Newt Gingrich's Nimrod wife was the ambassador to the Vatican or whatever, totally unqualified. But it still happens, but just at a lesser level.
Right. Ian's like, I asked one fucking question. 20 minutes later, they're still talking. After Garfield's inauguration in March of 1881, Guiteau stayed in Washington, D.C. and would show up at the White House every day with thousands of others, insisting he be appointed a cabinet position.
How did anything get done? That's insanity.
I think it was, if I remember right, like from 10 to 12 every day, Garfield blocked off to literally just meet with random citizens.
Wow.
And again, this is a time when the president was known to be one of the people. He had to be accessible to everybody. I know there's stories of presidents that every afternoon they'd take walks around DC. There's no security or anything. They're a man of the people. So it was an open door policy. These people come in and you get to meet with the president. And Plead your case.
You're like, hi, I'm the cheese eating champion from Wisconsin. I voted for you. I'd like to be the commerce secretary.
Yeah. So he would meet with these people. Guiteau initially requested to be named the U.S. ambassador to Vienna, but later demanded the diplomat post in Paris. And Guiteau actually did get one face-to-face meeting with Garfield, which at the time Guiteau felt went very well. However, Garfield had no intention of actually giving Guiteau a spot in his cabinet. Guiteau gave Garfield the speech that he claims won him, the election. And, I think Garfield was polite and had his meeting and then kind of sent Guiteau on his way. Guiteau left that meeting thinking, just any day now I'm going to get that call. I'm ready to go. On top of his daily White House visits, Guiteau also wrote the president letters pleading his case and crediting his speech for getting Garfield elected. Guiteau even began harassing Secretary of State James Blaine and other Republican officials about a position, hanging out in hotel lobbies and essentially stalking these people.
How about that job, man? I suck your dick.
Yeah, pretty much. Remember, Guiteau thought it was his divine duty, called upon by God to be giving a high position, and he was supposed to do great things in the world. Finally, on May 14th, 1881, after months of asking, begging, pleading, harassing, and stalking, Guiteau encountered Secretary of State Blaine one last time and inquired about a consular appointment. A frustrated and at this point pissed off Blaine yelled, quote, "Never speak to me again on the Paris consulship as long as you live." Guiteau was then also banned from the executive mansion.
I've had to do that in public, though. Never speak to me about the signed koozie again. Okay, Mom, you ready to order lunch?
It was after this run-in with Blaine that Guiteau finally realized, hey, you know what? I might not actually be getting a cabinet position after all. So as the days went by and he kind of stewed over this, he convinced himself that Garfield was a terrible man and was destroying the popularity of the party. Guiteau now felt it was his divine duty to save the Republican Party and thus make himself a hero by helping Vice President Chester Arthur ascend to power. Guiteau stated that this idea came to him on the evening of May 18th, 1881. He believed that God had called on him to save the country, remove the current president from office, and make Chester Arthur the new president. To accomplish this, Guiteau borrowed $15 from a distant relative and went out to buy a gun. He decided to purchase a .442 Webley caliber British Bulldog revolver. He had the option to buy a cheaper version with a wooden handle, but opted for one with an ivory handle because Guiteau thought the ivory one would look better in a museum where he believed it would surely end up to commemorate his heroic act. I mean, he was literally thinking like this ahead.
Thankfully, the country no longer has crazy people like this.
Right. Like, I think the wooden one was like $9 and then the ivory one was like $10. For him, that could have meant like a night in a hotel or eating. Yeah. He wanted to spend more money because it was going to, be in a museum. Yeah. Thank God we cleaned up and no one's this crazy anymore. Guiteau spent the whole month of June following Garfield around D.C., trying to learn more about Garfield's schedule and determine the perfect time to assassinate him. Now, like we said kind of just a bit ago, remember, there was no Secret Service at this time. The Secret Service wouldn't come to be until after William McKinley was assassinated in 1901.
Isn't that crazy?
There was no motorcades. There was no protection for the presidents.
Just walking around town.
Right. The executive mansion had an open door. The president was just a man of the people. So it would be very easy for someone at this time to stalk the president if they wanted to. Guiteau, they said, would sleep on a park bench right outside the White House or the executive mansion and wait. When he saw Garfield leave, he'd follow him.
It's 15 years after Lincoln took a bullet in the back of the head.
And they said people were still shocked, but they thought that was a one-off fluke.
Yeah.
They thought, no, that would never happen again. And it was the hostility of the Civil War. That's what did it. Because at this time, Lincoln was the only president assassinated.
Yeah.
Once he trailed Garfield to a railway station as the president was seeing his wife Lucretia off to a beach resort in New Jersey. Guiteau was prepared to make his move then, but decided against it as Lucretia was recovering from malaria and he didn't want to further upset her
by having nice of him.
Witness her husband killed. On another occasion, he stalked Garfield from a window as the president was sitting in church. Again, he didn't shoot Garfield because Garfield was sitting right next to his wife. Also around this time, Guiteau wrote one last letter to Garfield stating that he should fire Secretary Blaine or, quote, "you and the Republican Party will come to grief." Obviously, this letter went unanswered. And again, when there's no Secret Service to kind of filter these and be like, maybe we should look into this. It was ignored like all of his hundreds of other letters he probably sent. As part of the, and this just is just crazy to me. As part of the ongoing preparations and further evidence of Guiteau's loss of reality, he wrote a letter to William Tecumseh Sherman, the commanding general of the United States Army, asking for protection from the mob that he assumed would come after him after he killed the president. The letter to Sherman also made reference to the Army protecting Guiteau after the new president, Chester Arthur, ordered his immediate release from jail. Guiteau also wrote other letters justifying his actions as necessary to heal the dissension between the factions of the Republican Party. He intended to have these letters on him when he finally shot Garfield.
I think this is Q, like back in the day.
Kind of sounds like
QAnon Q, right? He's the dude.
He's, it's his duty from God. He's got to save the party. He also planned to send a copy of his book, The Truth, to the New York Herald, as well as his autobiography, asking them to print both. At one point, Guiteau even went to the D.C. jail to ask for a tour of the facility where he expected to be incarcerated. He wasn't able to get a tour, but did manage to see enough of the facility to deem it appropriate for his stay, fully believing he wouldn't be there long, as he would be set free by the new president and praised for his actions. Eventually, through the press, Guiteau learned that on July 2nd, 1881, Garfield was scheduled to leave Washington, D.C., heading to New Jersey to meet his wife for a summer vacation with their children. He decided this would finally be the moment that he killed the president.
We'll be right back.
Charles Guiteau arose early on the morning of July 2nd, 1881. He had breakfast, got his shoes shined, and went to the train station early to prepare for the assassination.
You want scuffed shoes or you're going to smoke the president, right?
I guess. Well, this was going to be his moment of fame, right?
Yeah,
he was going to become a hero. While there, he kept walking in and out of the bathroom, where he would check his gun to make sure it was ready for use.
That's not a great idea.
Garfield arrived at the station shortly before his train was scheduled to leave. The president was accompanied by his sons, James and Harry, and Secretary of State James Blaine. His Secretary of War, Robert Todd Lincoln, one of Abraham Lincoln's sons, was already at the station and waiting to see him off. As we stated earlier, Garfield had no bodyguards or Secret Service protection at the time. Abraham Lincoln was the only former president to have had a bodyguard, and that was due to the hostility and tension of the Civil War. As Garfield entered the train station, Guiteau snuck up behind him and fired a shot at the president at point-blank range from behind. Garfield cried out, "My God, what is this?"
My God, what is this? That's a great quote. What is with you, man?
Guiteau fired a second shot, and Garfield collapsed to the floor. The first bullet actually just grazed Garfield's arm, but the second bullet struck him directly in the back. Guiteau put his pistol back in his pocket and made an attempt to flee, but a bystander blocked the door, allowing a ticket agent and a police officer to apprehend him. Angry witnesses immediately surrounded Guiteau and began yelling, "Lynch him." Guiteau asked the police officer to be taken to jail and was immediately whisked away. Once in police custody, Guiteau stated, quote, "I am a stalwart of the stalwarts. I did it, and I want to be arrested. Arthur is president now." He also later told the detective, "You stick to me. Arthur and all those men are my friends, and I'll have you made chief of police." These statements by Guiteau briefly led to suspicions that Vice President Chester Arthur, or a member of the stalwart part of the Republican Party, had put Guiteau up to the crime. But this theory proved unfounded, and nothing really ever came of it.
Are you sure?
Well, I am not sure.
A good conspiracy is one that would be disproved or you would never even know about, right?
Yeah. Well, it was a lot of what he had to say, and then I think they just figured out this guy's a madman.
Okay, fair enough.
Back at the train station, 10 physicians rushed to the scene. One of them, an expert in gunshot wounds named Dr. Willard Bliss, would ultimately become Garfield's chief physician. And that's not me calling him by his title. His first name was Dr. Willard.
Is that right?
Yes.
Oh.
So his parents, I think, kind of set him up for that one.
They call me Dr. Bliss. They call me Dr. Bliss.
Kiss, 1976. So yeah, his first name was Dr. Willard Bliss. That was his name.
I got to be honest, I don't hate it.
But I think you would, like, if you, in the books I had read, he's always referred to as Willard Bliss. So I think he went by Willard, maybe because now then his title became Dr.
So
Bliss.
he'd be Doctor
Willard Bliss.
Doctor. I mean, you almost have to be a doctor, right?
That's what I'm saying. Like his parents kind of set him up for that.
Like
one.
what else are you gonna do?
What do you do?
That could be a street sweeper or a janitor, right?
Right.
This is a doctor, the janitor.
Like he does a good job sweeping the halls. Like, thanks, doctor.
Like if your parents name you porn actor Bliss, like you're gonna have to be a porn actor, right?
Yeah. Ooh, porn.
Not gonna be an accountant.
Porn Bliss.
Porn Bliss.
Porn Bliss. Just saying, it's out there, folks. Dr. Willard Bliss was actually one of the physicians that initially tried to save Abraham Lincoln's life after he was shot, and he had also previously treated President Zachary Taylor for malaria. Focused on finding and removing the bullet, Bliss and the other doctors stuck their unwashed fingers in Garfield's wound and probed around with no success and without applying any solutions or anesthetics. Also, all of this was occurring on the dirty train station floor and eventually on some random mattresses that were brought in from off the street.
I mean, my name's not doctor, but it doesn't seem like a great idea to me.
But wait, there's more. Let's give you a little idea of what practicing medicine was like in the 19th century in America. This type of grimy, disgusting bullet searches were common medical practices for treating gunshot wounds. What's astonishing about this is that 16 years prior to Garfield being shot, Dr. Joseph Lister, a British surgeon, had introduced antisepsis to Europe, and it was revolutionizing the way British and European doctors practice medicine. Dr. Lister even presented his case on antisepsis to the U.S. Medical Congress 5 years prior to this shooting in 1876. Still, American doctors scoffed at it. To give you more of an idea on the mindset of American physicians at the time, they didn't believe in, quote, invisible germs, and thought the whole idea was ridiculous.
They named Listerine after that guy.
Is that what it was?
Yeah.
Is that official? Yeah. There you go. After Dr. Joseph Lister.
That's right.
American doctors even prided themselves on, quote, the good old surgical stink that filled their hospitals and operating rooms. In many cases, they even ignored basic hygiene practices.
I mean, surely, Mike, 150 years later, thinking like this no longer exists, right? I ain't wearing no mask. This virus is a hoax.
Oh, goddamn.
I like that one on Patreon. You said like in that accent.
The what?
In that accent, or like in the southern thing about COVID. You said something like, I don't give a goddamn about your grandma.
Fuck your grandma. I ain't wearing no mask.
I do not remember any of this.
I can't breathe in a mask. Take your grandma to the morgue. Ain't no such thing as COVID.
What episode was this?
I don't know.
God damn. All right. Anti-mask Dave, thank you for joining us.
Sure.
Oftentimes, these doctors would not change clothes when working on patients. They'd literally wear exactly what they wore off the street. If they wore lab coats, they wouldn't wash them, believing that the more blood, pus, and filth it had on it, the more of a tribute it was to their years of experience. Absolutely astonishing and grotesque.
Question. If they didn't believe in, quote, invisible germs, then what did they think? How did they think people got sick?
You would see a disease, you would see germs, you would discover it in their body. They didn't believe in like cleaning their tools. That would not make a difference. Like you don't have to clean your equipment. There was reports like that I read, I didn't include it in here, but since you asked, like they would be doing surgeries and if their hands were tied up, they'd put the instruments in their mouth. Or like sometimes when they would like start using antisepsis, they would be using it with like wooden tools. Wooden tools don't work with the antisepsis like it was, with your other items.
Right.
Like they were just completely aloof to it. Like you don't get germs magically in the air. Like that doesn't exist. You don't have to wash your hands. You can go from being inside of one person, surgically to just going right inside of another. That doesn't make a difference. Like just completely different time.
Kind of like College Mike going unprotected from inside one person right to the other.
College Mike did not believe in antisepsis. And it wouldn't have made a difference because you can't put wood in antisepsis anyway. So
I don't think I could stop vomiting long enough to help someone in that sort of environment.
Like those lab coats have got to be like as hard as a rock, right? Like filled with like just dried blood and pus and whatever else you have fucking on it.
Isn't that crazy?
Putting the surgical instruments in your mouth, in your holding them in your teeth while you're working on someone.
It's not great. I would not.
It's unimaginable.
No. Well, this is also the days, right, where like the doctor's doing shots of whiskey while he's working on you, giving you a shot as well.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
Like, you know. Another interesting note about Dr. Willard Bliss, and this kind of puts things a little bit more in perspective as to why he was the way he was. Early in his career, he was expelled from the District of Columbia Medical Society for support of homeopathy and for his opposition to the medical society's exclusion of African American members. Bliss's career was essentially in jeopardy for this, so he decided to keep his mouth shut and just practice medicine. This also meant that moving forward, Bliss was hesitant to accept any new movements in medicine, which included the new antiseptic methods that had been proposed by Dr. Joseph Lister in Europe. So he was almost blackballed for, you know, embracing new medical ideas. And
so once you get smacked down like that, you're
right. He was almost
going to be hesitant.
Yeah, dismissed. And, you know, he was sticking up for African Americans and why they couldn't be accepted into the medical society. And he pretty much was told to shut up and get back to work. So back to Garfield. After about an hour of lying on the floor, experiencing excruciating pain as the doctors prodded and wounded his wound, looking for the bullet, President Garfield was moved from the train station back to the executive mansion where a makeshift hospital room was set up.
Can you imagine someone digging in an open wound like that for a bullet with no anesthesia, nothing?
I mean, you would imagine hygiene is not great.
Right.
Already. I mean, you've described all kind of stuff, so... It's like the first finger that goes in, that's instant infection, right? Like within 24 hours.
Yeah, of course.
Well, and I also just think like it was a different time and different generation, different age where like men were probably just tougher, like just tougher men. Like we'd be screaming like little bitches. Like if I have a little cut and a doctor would like touch, I'm like, what the fuck? These guys were like literally fingers deep in a bullet wound.
Yeah.
And like, you know, what I'm about to get to here, they set up a room at the executive mansion. At the time, Garfield was still bleeding profusely, and they didn't believe he would survive the night. Garfield, the entire time throughout this, was conscious and stoic and never once complained about the pain that he was in while they were literally prodding his wound. Ugh. He even tried to reassure one of his crying sons, saying, quote, "The upper story is all right. It is only the hall that was damaged." Surprisingly, Garfield survived the night, and the next day his vital signs were better. The doctors began to hope for a potential recovery. I just can't imagine, like, he no-sold being hurt.
Yeah, right.
Bleeding profusely, shot in the back. Anyways.
Maybe you're in shock and it doesn't hurt that bad.
Yeah, that could be too. That's a good point.
Yeah.
What side of his back was he shot in?
So, incidentally, we'll get into that. It went in through the right side, and that's where the physicians thought that the path of the bullet was. Okay. But we'll get to that in a bit. Makes a big difference here in a little while. Unfortunately, this up and down status on his health would be a trend for the next several weeks. The president, who again was still only 49 years old at the time, had rallied in the first few days after the shooting, but his condition worsened after Dr. Bliss administered heavy doses of quinine, morphine, and alcohol, which brought on bouts of vomiting that left Garfield weak and emaciated.
I mean, 49's pretty young. I've heard it's the new 25 these days.
I mean, I'm just saying right now, if someone shot you in the back, I think you'd survive. I think you could survive.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
You're all right.
I mean, there's going to be someone who has a hit out on at least me, probably you. I think Ian's all right for right now. The doctors fear that the path of the bullet in the body may have struck a major artery, hit a vital organ, or even damaged his spinal cord, as Garfield indicated he often couldn't feel his feet. By late July, so now we're talking he was shot July 2nd, now by the end of the month, the president appeared septic. Most likely because the doctors tortured the president with relentless finger probing and numerous surgical attempts to widen the 3-inch deep wound into a 20-inch long incision that started at his ribs and extended to his groin.
God damn.
Given their standards for cleanliness, this wound obviously became infected and pus-ridden. Garfield was left with a persistent fever and abscesses all over his body. His weight dipped from 210 pounds down to 130, and he began experiencing hallucinations. There was even stories they would have to and I don't remember the whole science of it, but they would have to feed him through his ass. Like they would, in his anus, like they would be like stuffing whatever they could, just to give him like protein or to get him anything kind of nutrition.
That works?
Well, clearly not.
I know you can drink booze through your ass to get drunk, right?
Or coffee enemas, right? I've seen that somewhere before.
They were trying to whatever. He couldn't hold anything down. He would go through times when he maybe could, but he just, in the end, he really couldn't stomach anything. At one point, I think it was milk was like one of the only things he was able to do. So like people donated cows to the White House that they would have on the White House lawn so that he would have fresh milk. Just wild. He also
non-pasteurized.
Yeah, he had a condition even before when he was healthy where he was prescribed. I can't remember the name of the condition. I'd have to look it up. He was prescribed like raw meat as part of his diet. So every day he would have a raw meat sandwich for lunch.
I have that prescription. It's tasty.
Yeah, raw meat. So
just the medical profession and all that stuff back then is just so terrifying. I mean, you read those stories about Civil War, battlefield surgery and amputations and all that. It is just horrific.
They're like using another guy's leg to cut off your leg at that point. Like they're just.
I mean, come on, just off the chart stuff.
So at this point, he's septic. He's lost 210 pounds down to 130. And they said when you saw him, because he was always covered in sheets, his head always remained the same. He was known for having a really large head. Like you always say you have, Dave.
I can relate. I have a very bulbous head myself. I get it.
Maybe Garfield's your uncle, not Grant.
Maybe so.
But anyway, so like they said, if you just saw his head, he looked the same. It was just his body that was just, lost all the weight.
Man, awful.
He was always known for his broad shoulders, just being, athletic and big and strong. And not anymore.
Yeah, I can relate to that, Mike.
Yeah,
thanks.
Of course.
Sure.
By this point, even though their other doctors were involved, Dr. Bliss had pretty much asserted himself as Garfield's lead physician. He controlled every aspect of his treatment and would let very few people see him. And any other doctors who tried to help were given nursing roles and not allowed to make any major decisions.
Where did this guy come from initially? Like, how was he tapped to help at the train station? Did someone know him? Was he nearby at a hospital?
Robert Todd Lincoln knew of him because he helped treat Abraham Lincoln.
So
they kind of ran and got him.
Okay.
And he was a Clevelander, so Garfield knew him from home. So they kind of had that connection, and he just kind of asserted himself and took over. And it got to the point where it was like all miscommunicated as to who actually made the determination.
Yeah.
And I think Bliss kind of manipulated it a bit to say, well, Garfield said I'm his head doctor, but then told Lucretia, like, Garfield said I'm the head. So then she started telling people, my husband said.
He worked his way in there.
He kind of manipulated it. But in the end, I think you do need, I think that is important to have one person in the command. It's just a matter of, because you don't want too many fingers dipping in.
Well, you need an official White House physician, which
you would need that.
Wasn't in place at the time.
That wasn't in place,
so, yeah.
No. One of the physicians that did treat him at the hospital when one of those initial 10 came up was an African-American physician, and that was the first ever African-American physician to serve to treat a president, even though it was brief. And then Lucretia's personal physician, who was a female, was also one of the ones to treat him at the White House, but she was treated as a nurse by Dr. Bliss.
Shocking.
Yeah. But not just because she was a woman. He treated every doctor who came in as a nurse. Right. It wasn't necessarily because she was a woman.
Hey, when your first name's Doctor, man.
I mean, it does. What are you going to do? Bliss pretty much accepted that his career was on the line with how he handled the care of the president. He even controlled the narrative that was going out to the public, who was following the president's condition with bated breath. In the press, Bliss downplayed the seriousness of the president's condition, and even when things got grave, he still informed the press he believed Garfield would recover, though in all actuality, he probably knew that wasn't the truth. Here's the most interesting part, I think, in my opinion, of this entire story, which I never knew up until I started reading these books here in the last couple months. By August of 1881, Dr. Bliss was contacted by an inventor, Alexander Graham Bell, who most infamously was one of the leading inventors of the telephone. And now what I liked about or learned about this was while many people were working on the telephone, Alexander Graham Bell managed to be the first one to get a patent on it, which is why he's most infamously associated with the telephone.
Right. You guys know why he named it the telephone?
What? Why is that?
It had a nice ring to
it. He's here all week, folks. So while working on developing the telephone, Bell discovered what became known as an induction balance. Essentially, this was the most primitive form of what would later become the metal detector. Following the news about the president and learning that the doctors were searching for the bullet, believing it would save Garfield's life, Bell went to work perfecting the induction balance and getting it prepared to assist doctors however it may. After several tireless weeks, and we're talking like Bell, who he lived in New England. He had a lab in DC. He deserted his family. He just obsessed over this.
It's the president.
Right. He was obsessed with getting this induction balance working well. He was finally invited to the executive mansion to try his device out after he finally got it working well and got in contact with Dr. Bliss. The first screening and trial failed, however, due to interference from the metal springs in the president's mattress.
You could have a foam mattress.
Well, should have. I mean, come on.
Come on.
It's a smartphone.
What are you doing?
On a second visit with Garfield on a new mattress, Bell was, and Ian, here goes back to your question about where the bullet went in his body. On a second visit, Bell was only permitted to search the right side of Garfield's body, where Dr. Bliss incorrectly believed the bullet was lodged. Had Bell been permitted to check the left side of Garfield's body, he very well may have discovered the bullet. In the end, the induction balance developed by Alexander Graham Bell was not successful in locating the bullet lodged in Garfield's body. And that was interesting because had they just allowed it, Bliss was concerned because Garfield would get exhausted during this. He was septic. He was dying. So it was a lot of effort for them to roll him, let Bliss, and we'll post a picture. He would be listening to a phone across the room while his assistant ran this machine over, Garfield's body very slowly and meticulously. Yeah. And Bliss was worried that it was just too much stress on Garfield. So you're only going to check the side that I know the bullet's on. Right. And he thought he was doing his best to save Garfield. In all actuality, if they would have come back the next day and done the other side, they might have found the bullet because Bell had it working in his lab. He wasn't allowed to check the correct side. So now we're at September of 1881. Again, this is 2 months after being shot.
Was Arthur running the country at this point? I mean, this is pre-25th Amendment. There was not a provision to transfer power, right?
Nobody really knew what to do. Garfield, at one point during these couple months, had a cabinet meeting over his hospital bed. But that was really it. There was just kind of nothing. It was just a holding period.
Nobody was in charge.
Chester Arthur refused to do anything and was he kind of went into hiding and was really overcome with grief. One, because if you look into Chester Arthur, he kind of always failed upwards, never really earned his position, and again was kind of given the vice presidency as if they're going to have Garfield, we'll give the stalwarts, Chester Arthur. He was, I don't think, mentally prepared to be the president, nor, he kind of grew fond of Garfield. He didn't want him to die. He went in hiding from the press while Garfield was hospitalized and wouldn't, make appearances, refused to talk about becoming president, saying, no, we're going to think positive about this. So nothing, it was just kind of a state of limbo, which is scary to think about. But luckily, it was just kind of a time of peace, in the country. There was nothing much going on. Well, there was a lot going on, but not.
I mean, it's scary.
It's just there's nobody running things.
Even, 1918 when Woodrow Wilson had a stroke. Allegedly, his wife was running the country for 3 months. That's scary shit, right, man. You got to have
and then you even look
continuity of government plans going on, which I think is why they passed the 25th Amendment ultimately.
But then you even look at, what the later Reagan years where people say, he was starting to lose his mind from Alzheimer's, and it was Nancy kind of.
Oh, from day one.
There's the videos of Nancy from day one. There's the videos of Nancy, telling him what to say in his speeches behind him. It's crazy how that happens. And even then there were things in place and it still was, nuts. So no, at
Nancy
this point,
Reagan, blowjob queen of Hollywood.
Oh boy.
We talked about this before.
I believe
you've
so.
mentioned this many times. Every time I bring up Ronald Reagan, it's a great story. Reagan.
She gave the best blowjob in Hollywood. Nancy Davis. Allegedly.
Maybe that's coming to a bonus show near you. Dave's going to do a whole episode on Nancy Reagan's blowjobs. So no, there was really no one running
Just say no, but she said yes. Every time, apparently.
So by September, 2 months after being shot, a massive infection had taken over the president's body. Like we said earlier, always a lover of the sea, he asked to be taken to a cottage on the Jersey shore in hope that the cool sea air could revive him. On September 6th, he was taken by train to Elberon, New Jersey, where volunteers had worked all night to build a private line from the train station in New Jersey directly to the front steps of the cottage Garfield would be staying, so that he wouldn't have to be transferred into multiple vehicles in such a weak condition.
They built a train track overnight?
Overnight. They worked to get it
God
directly
damn.
to the front door
amazing.
of the cottage she was
American
staying at.
ingenuity right there.
But just wait, there's more. As Garfield's train approached the home, it had difficulty making it up a hill. So hundreds of local volunteers unhooked his car and pushed it the rest of the way to the college.
Wow.
Just people joining in.
That's
Hundreds
pretty cool.
upon hundreds of people. Unfortunately, the change of scenery and the fresh sea air didn't help. New infections set in, and the president began experiencing severe chest pains. Finally, at 10:35 p.m. on the night of September 19th, 1881, President James A. Garfield passed away. He had been president of the United States for just 200 days. Garfield's causes of death included a fatal heart attack, the rupture of the splenic artery, which resulted in a massive hemorrhage, and septic blood poisoning. As fate would have it, the bullet inside of Garfield had actually missed all of his arteries and vital organs and came to rest near his pancreas. In the end, there was no direct proof that the bullet caused any damage that led directly to Garfield's death.
Wow. So today probably would have been released in a couple days.
Probably would have been fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, that's insane.
And also I think right after this, within 15 years after this, they had developed the X-ray machine, which also would have saved his life because they could have easily found the bullet. Yeah. You wouldn't need them. You don't need to go over people with a metal detector,
Right.
Which give Bell credit. He was trying, but X-ray would have made things a lot easier. Most of today's historians and medical experts believe that Garfield would have survived the shooting had the doctors treating him done a better job in their care. Dr. Bliss, as well as other doctors who treated the president, had guessed wrong about the path of the bullet in his body. They had focused their probing to the right side of his back and failed to check the left side, missing the location of the bullet. And by focusing their probing on the right side, where there was no initial damage, they created a new channel in the president's body, which eventually filled with pus when he became septic. The autopsy completed after Garfield's death discovered this error and also revealed that he had developed pneumonia in both lungs and that pretty much his entire body had filled with pus due to the uncontrolled sepsis.
It's a literal pus bucket.
He's filled to the brim.
Man. Oh, that's awful. It had to be just agonizing, too.
Yeah.
That's a lot of pain.
And he never really sold it to anybody.
Oh, man. That's awful.
There are no accounts of him acting like he was in pain. On September 20th, 1881, while the nation mourned, Chester A. Arthur was sworn in as the 21st President of the United States. Garfield's body lay in state at the Capitol Rotunda, where nearly 100,000 people showed up to pay their respects, before he was transported back home to Cleveland and buried at Lakeview Cemetery. On October 14th, 1881, Charles Guiteau, still waiting to be praised as a hero, was indicted for murder. While being held in jail, vigilantes tried unsuccessfully on 2 separate occasions to shoot Guiteau through his jail cell window. What's interesting about this is, he wrote that letter to William Tecumseh Sherman of the United States Army to come, save him. Well, the Army did actually show up at the jail, but it was more so to keep people out from going to kill him.
He's probably like, woohoo, General Sherman's here.
Yeah, when Guiteau saw that, he was like, fuck yeah, here we go.
Telling all the prisoners, see you later, motherfucker.
Right, and it was actually one of the soldiers who turned and shot at him once when they saw him in the window. Yeah. They were one of the vigilantes.
This country was wild in the 1800s.
It's no holds barred.
Just no rules.
Every day was a no holds barred match as to whether or not you lived or died. His trial began on November 17th, 1881, and even though Guiteau insisted on representing himself, because he had his law, he passed the bar and all, the court appointed him a public defender. However, this dude quit in less than a week. Guiteau's brother-in-law then felt obligated to assist him and took the case as his defense team. Given the nature of this case and the anger of the American people, the court had to go through 150 different men before they were able to establish an impartial jury. Guiteau entered a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity, which is one of the earliest high-profile cases in American history to see an insanity plea. Guiteau argued that the assassination had been, quote, God's act and not mine. He even had a prominent neurologist take the stand to testify that he believed Guiteau to be insane and, quote, a moral monstrosity. Guiteau also argued that the true cause of Garfield's death was malpractice at the hands of his doctors, stating, quote, the doctors killed him, I just shot him. There was some validity to this argument that the medical malpractice led to Garfield's death, but the true extent of that malpractice wouldn't be realized for years.
A lot of validity.
With the trial ongoing, Guiteau was basking in the media attention he received. He was actively making plans to start a lecture tour after his release and to run for president himself in 1884. But on January 25th, 1882, it took the jury less than an hour to return a guilty verdict. He was sentenced to death by hanging.
He's like, what? What's this now? Wait, what?
Guiteau was, in fact, shocked by this outcome and shouted at the jury, quote, "You are all low, consummate jackasses."
That's like, that reminds me of Ted Bundy. When he got sentenced, he got up and screamed, "Tell the jury they're wrong."
Yeah, I know that. It's in my book I'm reading.
Yeah.
We look forward to your episode.
I can't wait. Guiteau tried to appeal, but it was rejected, and on June 30th, 1882, he was set to be hanged. The day of the execution, Guiteau hammed it up. He danced his way up to the gallows and waved at the audience. He shook hands with the executioner, and as his last words, recited a poem that he had written called, "I am going to the Lordy." Per Guiteau's request to the executioner, he would signal that he was ready to die by dropping the paper containing the poem. When he did, a black hood was placed over his still smiling head, the trapdoor was sprung open, and Guiteau was dropped, snapping his neck and killing him instantly.
Most importantly, did we keep last meal records back in these days?
I don't know. I think we did.
No, I don't think we did either. I printed that poem. What's it called? I'm going to the Lordy. I was gonna read it, but it's not that great. So
I want to hear it.
I passed.
You passed. You don't have it.
No.
Okay. It wasn't great.
No, it wasn't great.
Part of Guiteau's brain remains on display in a jar at the Mooney Museum in Philadelphia. Some of his bones and more of his brain, along with Garfield's backbone and a few ribs, are kept at the National Museum of Health and Medicine in Silver Spring, Maryland.
Pieces of a U.S. president's body are on display at a museum?
National Museum of Health and Medicine.
How is that? Mm-hmm. That's,
I mean, you can see the clothes that Lincoln was shot in at the Ford's Theater Museum.
But part of his body?
His
bones. Crypt is missing part of his body. It's very disrespectful. Yeah. I wonder how that happened.
Well, they take it out for testing to see if he had there were arguments that he got his blood poisoning because of the bones that might have been shattered when he was shot. Like if it hit part of his spine and his bone shattered, and like that led to part of his septic blood poisoning. So,
but they should make your body whole before the burial.
I don't know.
It's really strange.
It's science. It's science, Dave. You got to study it.
It's not science.
What's in the National Museum of Health and Medicine?
Can walk by and look at it. Come on.
Yeah, I don't know.
That's not right.
I don't know.
That is odd. You wouldn't expect that with the president.
Right. Like a slice of Einstein's brain is at that place too, I believe.
Is it?
The Mooney Museum.
Makes sense.
Really?
It's just weird. I don't know. Like murderers that got studied. Okay, they maybe had no next of kin and they didn't really have any rights in there. Mm-hmm. Like what's his name? Isn't Albert Fish's fucking split open head on display somewhere in Wisconsin?
Yeah.
Was it Albert Fish or was it?
I think so.
Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds right.
But I don't know. Fucking U.S. president? It seems weird. Anyway, sorry. Continue.
I think
Seems
it'd be
odd to
fucking
me.
cool to go see. I think it's cool.
It's just
to go see.
disrespectful. I don't know.
Well, I'm sure they're not doing it against everyone's will. Like I'm sure it was donated or the family was okay with it or whatever. Like they're not just like we cut this out of him.
I don't know. I don't like it.
So it's there on display. As a quick follow-up on Dr. Willard Bliss, after Garfield's death, he sent a claim to the federal government for $25,000 for the services he provided to Garfield. He was instead offered $6,500, which he refused. In today's money, he requested $666,000 and was offered $170,000.
Well, he killed him, so maybe take the 170.
He did not. He was so insulted by
fuck.
that. Yeah. Even before the full extent of Garfield's treatment was discovered, some believed Bliss was guilty of malpractice, though he was never actually charged. His medical practice and his reputation would remain tarnished for the rest of his life. The end.
It's an interesting story.
It's very interesting. Stuff that I knew nothing about any of it.
I would never guess in that entire story that of all of that information, Dave would get hot about Garfield's ribs being on display.
It's just weird.
I understand.
It's disrespectful. I don't know. Like there's a crypt, right? There's a mausoleum at Lakeview Cemetery with Garfield's body, but it's not whole, right?
Well, you're just looking at a casket covered in an American flag.
Sure,
yeah.
but I don't know.
Well, it's missing part of his ribs, and what did I say?
Like a rib bones at a fucking museum somewhere.
His backbone and a few ribs. Yeah,
it's very strange.
Maybe the National Health and Science and Medicine Museum. Maybe they should feel like, hey, look at how far we fucking came. These guys thought they were treating him well. I don't know.
I think we should start a crusade to reunite that backbone to the mausoleum, to the crypt. It's disrespectful.
What if we get the backbone
I don't like it.
Get the backbone here in studio. Put it up on the wall.
Well, that'd be okay, I guess. No, it's very disrespectful.
We respect it. Obviously. No, I don't know. I see what you mean. I don't know.
So there have been 4 presidential assassinations throughout our history. Where does this one rank, I guess? I don't know, in terms of shock value. Is that a thing?
Well, Lincoln's one of the greatest presidents of all time, right? Mm-hmm. So that's got to be up there. And Kennedy's you can watch. So shock value is up there. So probably 3rd or 4th.
Yeah.
Probably last even, because McKinley
no one even knows who he is.
But McKinley was at the start of his 2nd term. Garfield was president 200 days. Yeah. Probably the least shocking of the assassinations. Okay. Probably.
That's fair.
McKinley was already, he was elected in 1896 and then just won re-election and then was assassinated. So he had already established himself as, a president.
Pretty close together, those 2 assassinations.
Yeah. The 3 of them.
Yeah, that's true.
65, 81, and 1901. So all with less than 40 years apart.
Yeah, that's a lot. 40 years.
Yeah. We have a good streak going right now. Not been since 63.
I knocked on this Formica table.
Knock on Formica? That's a thing. That's a thing. I gave away I had a few other fun facts at the end of this that didn't quite fit in the story. I gave away the one about his inaugural address, addressing racial injustice. Another fun fact, he was the first left-handed president. So there you go. And
Didn't they still tie up left-handed people's arms back then and make them learn to use their right?
That sounds about right.
Goddamn.
They used to be brutal with left-handed people.
Yeah.
That's
like you're inhabited by Satan, motherfucker. You're going to use your right hand like a normal person. Isn't that weird?
It's like
It's
people
very weird.
It's like people who wear black and listen to Metallica.
Well,
They obviously kill kids, right?
I feel like that wasn't even that long ago. People still
I was going to say,
frowned upon left-handed things. I want to say that this might be something that I'm just making up in my head, but it sounds right. That my mother-in-law is left-handed, and her school tried to get her to right-handed because it was better to write.
It's so crazy.
Yeah,
Because obviously that makes a difference to the kind of person you are. Yeah.
I feel like people just come up with things and
you can't use your other hand. You can't do that.
Right.
everyone just rolls with
you
it.
can't do that.
Bizarre.
Here's the last fun fact. Dave, maybe you knew this. I did not. I found this very interesting. James Garfield is the only sitting member of the House of Representatives to be elected president to this day.
What do you mean sitting? What do you mean by sitting?
He was still in the middle of his term when he was elected.
Oh, because he got elected to the Senate, but that never took place.
Right. And
Interesting.
in history, there have only been 4 men elected as sitting members of Congress to the presidency.
But they were all senators.
Garfield was the first as a representative. In 1920, Senator from Ohio, Warren Harding.
Yeah.
In 1960, Senator from Massachusetts, John F. Kennedy.
And Barack Obama in 2008.
In 2008, Senator from Illinois, Barack Obama. Only 4 men had to resign their seats in Congress
Interesting.
to the presidency. I thought that was really. I would have never guessed that, especially from the House of Representatives. But yeah, they're all either were at the end of their term or they didn't have to resign a seat.
It's a fun fact.
So that's my story. People are like,
thank you for joining the PBS News Hour, our retrospective of James A. Garfield's presidency tonight.
Look, Ian deserved a week off. I hope he enjoyed it. We tried something different. Hopefully people liked it. If
I thought
not,
it was great.
If not, whatever. I had a damn good time.
I love this stuff.
Yeah.
I like to learn things, so.
Yeah. You got to learn this week and put your feet up and relax. So hopefully people enjoyed it. If not, you're not going to get to have to hear my voice every fucking week. Ian will be back next week, and I'll just interrupt about stories of hot dogs and double cheeseburgers and pizza rolls and hockey and
Good job, Mike. I enjoyed this.
Oh, thank you.
I liked
appreciate
it.
All right. So any final thoughts on the assassination of President Garfield? Ian, what do you got? Anything?
Good episode. I learned a lot.
Thank you. Hope you did.
That guy really sounded like he was schizophrenic.
Guiteau.
Yeah.
The God thing, especially, that's real common. Just absolutely delusional too.
Right.
Going down.
Yeah.
Thinking even in trial that he was gonna didn't expect to be found guilty.
He's like, any day now, I'll be getting out of here and I'll be running the country.
Old Chet's gonna get me out. And then he was planning on, like I said, a speaking tour,
right?
And then to run for president.
How I saved the country.
Yeah. Right. Like he thought he was a hero.
I think the other thing is that, obviously the finger and the bullet in the wound and stuff is going to cause an infection, but that surgery, that incision from his ribs down to his groin, right? Is that,
yeah.
That's like a death sentence pretty much, right? I mean,
I would think so back in those days.
Yeah, like we said, with no sterilization, like it's just all germ infested.
So at that point, you're especially done for.
Right. And on
like that.
On top of all that, we said it was in a White House that was falling apart. Like it was just a dirty, disgusting, rat infested White House.
Yeah.
And this was also in the middle of the summer where they said it was just extremely hot. They had to build a contraption that was, like one of the most primitive early forms of an air conditioner, where they were just like dumping ice and like filtering it behind just to keep Garfield cool because his body temperature was going up so high, and just crazy. Nothing was working in his favor.
Yeah.
Dave, any final thoughts?
One, I just think the medical status or the status of medical care in the 1800s is just atrocious. And it must have just been agonizing to lay there for 2 weeks with these fucking clowns digging in your wounds.
2 months.
And
2 months.
what did I say? 2 weeks? 2 months. Yeah.
2 months.
I mean, it's awful. Number two, if someone wants to trade their life for someone else's, even to this day, I don't think there's much you can do to stop that. So I think you can get to most people with a good plan. And I think it's impossible to stop assassination. So
I agree. I don't know if it's impossible to stop them. If like you said, if the person's willing to.
If you're willing to trade your life for someone else's, I think you
it.
can eventually get to them.
Yeah. Which is scary. It hasn't changed in all these years. It's a little bit more difficult now, a little more planning needed.
A little more difficult, but I think you can still get to most people.
So that's the assassination of President Garfield. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this show. Like we said, it was just kind of a one-off, give Ian a little bit of a break and just kind of mix things up a little. So he'll be back next week, and, I'll go back to being, all my tomfoolery and my fast foods and my sexual antics, and life will be hunky-dory, and I'll be shit-faced by the end of an episode, as opposed to just being a little bit buzzed like I am now, because I'll be able to drink a lot more when I'm not talking so damn much. But man, you get parched when you're talking.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah. All right, we got some patron shout-outs. Let me pull that up.
Thanks to Pussy Liquor 3000, Queef Master General 200.
I'll tell you what.
Oh, sorry, you're still doing those.
That's about what it's like. All right, thank you very much to patrons.
You say Pussy Liquor 3000.
You know what's going to happen next week? We're going to have Pussy Liquor 3000 as a new patron. All right, thank you very much to Kayla, Brooke Clariday, Josh Harris, Angie Johnson, Draper Caceres, Joel Weathers, Matt, Peachy, Derek D, Kathy Comlos, Colleen Abbey, Ashley Loves Mike.
Oh, how about that?
It could just be a shout out to her husband.
Could be. Doubtful.
Amy Villarreal, Rory Owen, Sammy Meserly, Mr. Muggs 66, Larissa Gallo, Marie Alberga, Chance Shreve, Kelly Wright, Amanda Reyes, J. Renee K, Sheelan Davis, Roxine Davis, Melanie Fox, Janine Galvin, Zach, John Marlowe, Andrew Lambert, Dad's Sock Drawer, Gregory Prez, Seth Ostergut, Ms. Shark Cooter Double Flap,
Shark Cooter Double Flap. Now you're talking.
Tori Cummins, Katie Hacker, Tanya Cameron, the Underground Ceramics Club, Vicky Tudor, Richard Evans, Stephen Weibel, and Anonymous.
Oh, anonymous. They're embarrassed to be associated with this show.
Yeah.
Sure.
Thank you very much. We are at patreon.com/Necronomipod.
His dad's stock drawer where you throw your crusty socks when you don't want mom to find them.
Is that what you fucking do? I thought you just ate it.
Ate the sock? Like
No, you do like a backward somersault and you just go right into your mouth, right? Just kidding. Like you let gravity take over, right?
I thought you meant you just ate the whole sock.
I'm getting a little sick to my stomach.
I'm kidding also, folks. Goddamn pals. Ian, what do you got?
For iTunes, I have one for Poon Police.
Poon Police.
I used to hide from them in college.
V's Crafty, Brenna H9. Thanks, guys, for the awesome reviews.
Dave, you got anything else?
No, I do not. Thank you to the Poon Police, though.
If I told you to give us all the socials, could you do it?
We're at Necronomipod on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and Necronomipod.com. Merch shirts available at Amazon.com. Search Necronomipod. Is that it?
Patreon.com/Necronomipod. And YouTube, Necronomipod.
Oh, Necronomipod on YouTube. YouTube.com, Necronomipod.
Nailed it. If anyone finds it from any of that, God bless them.
The other thing with iTunes just updated, so my shout outs are going to be behind because it only gives the last 10. It won't show any other ones now. So
interesting.
So if we get more than 10 in a week, someone might get missed out.
Maybe, well, it's tough to look at it all the time, to keep tabs on like that.
I keep interrupting you. I'm sorry. I didn't get to do that all night. You weren't talking, so I didn't get to interrupt you all night like I usually do.
That was part of my original opening when I was wordsmithing it. It was like, if you thought Mike was only good for interrupting Ian, then I'm like, no, that's not great. I'm going to change that.
You should have been like, just wait, there's hell to pay. And after like every sentence, Ian's like, I got something to say. No, never mind. So if you do leave an iTunes review and we miss you, just shoot us like a DM or a message or something and we'll make it right.
Yeah. DM me on Instagram or something.
The new system only allows us to see the last 10 and we don't usually get more than 10 in a week. But if we miss you, let us know. We do that with Patreon all the time. So, all right. Well, that's my spiel. I'm going to go fucking ice my throat now for the next week.
Drink throat coat, buddy. Throat coat.
Throat coat. Actually, I'm going to have a couple more beers and relax. I'm tired of stressing about it. So, all right, bye.
You guys ready for a cool down beer?
Cheers.